Welcome to Boat Building News, the podcast Achieving Excellence, a series of incredible conversations with some of the highest achievers from around the world. I'm excited. This is going to be epic. I absolutely loved my conversation talking recruitment with Steve Guest on this week's episode. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Achieving Excellence podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me along, Holly.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it all weekend, so thanks for this time.
A pleasure.
So let's go straight into it. In a nutshell, give yourself a little introduction. Tell us who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, so started off as a strategic qualified buyer. I've now been in recruiting for commercial permanent staff into the construction industry for probably the last 19 years or so now.
Oh, okay.
So I've gone from working for a big, large PLC to opening up a new region for a business where I spent 11 years. And then more recently, I've got my own small recruitment business in the Midlands where there's 5 of us, predominantly permanent recruitment.
Okay.
Across the board, I've just about to publish my 3rd book. I run a recruitment training program, which is 100% online. And globally trains recruitment consultants around the world.
Wow.
I've got a free recruitment mastery Facebook group where people can go and kind of collaborate and talk and let off some steam if they need to. That probably brings you up to date, I think, in a really small few seconds.
So I guess a vibe would be if you don't know it about recruitment, it's probably not worth knowing.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the days of school day, isn't it? I think recruitment's one of them industries where you're always learning, and there's different scenarios that jump up at any point. But I've seen a fair bit, and I've probably worked through a fair bit of.
So what's quite interesting, though, from everything you've said, is that you've not just. It's almost like you've not just seen recruitment as your job. You've kind of gone all in, haven't you? And you've thought, I'm going to immerse myself in recruitment.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other way, and I think I've always been that way inclined. When I was working as a buyer, my wife was working in recruitment, and I thought that I could do the same. I was seeing some of the pay packets and the success she was having, and I was initially told and went from an interview that I'd never make it as a recruiter. I didn't have the right character traits, didn't have the right profile, wasn't confident enough, wasn't what they're looking for, and actually you're never going to make it. And I went out of that interview to a different division within the same company, different P&L, and effectively said, take me on because they weren't over there and I'll prove them wrong.
Oh my goodness, I love that.
I think that was the conduit to success in many ways, because it was that, I don't know, that bit where somebody says you can't do it, and the bit in the back of my head was saying I can, and actually now I'm going to prove you wrong, that I can be better than anything else.
It gives you that extra bit of drive, doesn't it? I mean, I have similar things because I do quite a lot of sport, and I'm a runner, and something that really sticks in my head 2 years ago is my employer at the time said to me, Stop running, Holly. I was tired, actually. I'd gone to work and I was tired because I'd been up at 5 a.m. training. And he sat me down and he said, just stop running. Just, you've achieved enough now. Just stop. And I looked at him so confused and I thought, don't tell me I can't do something. And I carried on and I went and did it even more. And it's a similar type thing. If someone says you can't do it, it almost gives you that sort of spur on to do even more, doesn't it?
I think it's the fuel to your fire. And life's about hurdles, it's about challenges, it's about doing things that you're uncomfortable with. And I think when people say you can't do it, or you'll never do it, or you won't achieve it, or you can't get there, for me anyway, it just gets my back up and I'm sat there thinking, actually, I'm going to do it even more now. And I suppose,
you know what? That's a personality trait, I think, of a really decent recruiter, because there's probably 99 out of 100 people in that situation that would have gone, oh, right, well, I can't do it then. But then you're that 1% that shows the resilience that you actually need to be a successful recruiter, because you can't underestimate how resilient a good recruiter really needs to be.
you've got to have confidence in yourself. And I think, having worked as a buyer, I was consistently let down by salespeople. They wouldn't call when they said they would. They wouldn't complete the documents or the tenders. They wouldn't turn up for meetings, or they'd be late. It was all the basic sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, even if I was the worst recruiter, if I went in and did the basics right, actually I would get a few steps ahead,
Yeah.
and then I could learn, or I could become a better recruitment consultant and improve on that service and the confidence and the knowledge and everything else. So I just set about putting the basics right. So I became
Mm-hmm.
the reliable consultant that did things in a set way, a set process, a set plan. And clients and candidates got used to the fact that I was honest and open and communicated properly, told them the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And I think it allowed me to be confident in what I did, even if I was perhaps slightly different to your typical recruiter.
Mm.
I'm not your big salesy high-fiving, gong ringing, look at me, how good I am. I'm the quiet one that sits at the back, and actually just works diligently to make sure I'm at the top of the leaderboards.
Really, see, that actually really surprises me because, and it's probably a massive lesson in the fact that don't believe everything you see on social media.
Yeah.
Because actually, across LinkedIn and other social platforms, you're actually quite loud and you're there and you're like, "Hey, look at this!" And but
Yeah.
actually, you're saying that you're actually complete opposite to that.
And everything you see on social media really is me in my uncomfortable state.
Right.
And I've learned to be consistent with social media, putting videos out and doing all those sorts of things that many shy away from. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not comfortable. I don't enjoy them. I do it on the basis that my overall targets and goals and plans for me far outweighs me being uncomfortable for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
And
I relate to that, and you do you develop a bit of an immunity to that a little bit the more you do it. Occasionally, I mean, like last week, I had quite an uncomfortable week on social media. But you have to kind of be a little bit resilient to that because if someone said to me actually last week, if you're going to put yourself in that position, you've got to expect to feel like that a little bit.
yeah,
But I mean, ultimately, it's not the real person, it's not the real Steve Guest, is it? You've just said that.
not at all. And I think for me, it was about creating a difference. It was about differentiating me from anybody else. The reason I
Mm-hmm.
wrote the first book, Top Biller, was to differentiate me as a recruiter. So I became the recruitment consultant that wrote a book. It was never
Yeah.
for a vanity metric. It was never for like the high fiving bit. It was just the fact
Oh,
it was a
really?
challenge, something to do. I could hand it out to clients and say, look, this is what I've done.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah.
and the whole concept, I suppose, changed because of the success of it. And then you keep pushing and you do your live webinars or your videos and all the bits that you sit there thinking, oh my God, I could never do that. And then
Mm.
and then it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. And then you do it again and it's a little bit easier. But everything you do, anything related like that, you're there for ridicule. You're open to be pulled down at any point.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you're open to attack, and it's generally by people that don't do it themselves. It's not, and a lot of the time, it's never personal. It's just, I don't know. It's just that willingness for keyboard warriors to jump out and try and sabotage what you do.
Yeah, I had it last week, and I posted a video. I mean, yeah, ultimately, it was a casual video. I sat in my car. I didn't. I posted. I had no thought of what I looked like or anything like that. Really, it was a business related video. But in the video, I've got a tattoo. I've got some song lyrics tattooed on my arm, and it
Mhm.
was visible, and I thought nothing of it. And I always watch the videos before I post them, just in case there's anything I haven't seen. And I thought nothing of it. And I received, I was inundated last week with messages of people saying, giving an opinion on how appropriate it was or wasn't, and the fact they'd never noticed it before. And it blew my mind. I was like, is this for real? Like, how is this happening?
I don't know. I think I don't know if there's a self-preservation thing, but I got to the point where when I got comments, I used to just thank them or share a bit of love, or I would treat it with a bit of humour.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's engagement, whether you like
Yeah.
it or agree with it. I had someone years ago when I first started doing videos that would tell me my jumper didn't go with my shirt, or what I was wearing wasn't coordinated. And what?
But they're
Taking
actually
time out.
helping you out because they're making your post even more visible.
That's it. And sometimes, I mean, the best posts I've ever put out were ones that divided opinion, and it allowed for people to almost kind of argue or discuss or debate in the comments. And once you get that happening in your posts, that they
Yeah.
fly. So you've kind of got to embrace it in some way, that actually, if it's happening, great. If people have got an opinion, great. If you
Yeah.
agree with it, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's not offensive or rude, or other people might be offended by it, then I tend to leave them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, but what upsets me is they never tend to be. They know that their comments aren't great because they don't always put them publicly. It's the messages that come from it, and some of them are really bizarre. Like, oh, Holly, do you know that at 1 minute 15 of your video you look away from the camera? And quite. And then I'm like, I'm just grateful you got to 1 minute 15 of the video. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Thanks for watching.
it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous, and I think life, and certainly recruitment, is littered with being uncomfortable and those sorts of things. And I think sometimes it's just about powering through.
Mm.
Um, and the best way that I've found to deal with that is to have something that's far bigger and better than any one troll, any one comment, any one post. Um, I did a lot of FX and commodity trading years ago, and I've shared this thought process a number of times, where I was told never get fixated on any one particular trade. And you see it as one trade in 1,000. It fits your strategy, whether it goes up or down. You might win, you might lose, but it's one trade in 1,000. And I
Mm.
think I look at things like when I put social media posts out, or I do something that is a little bit uncomfortable. It's one trade in 1,000, and it's quickly
Yeah.
forgotten, and you move on to the next, and you just keep going. And as long as your strategy is good, and you've thought through it and you know what you're trying to get from it, it's just a little step along the way, good and bad.
Yeah, I suppose each social media post isn't the all or nothing. It's just you on your journey to your ultimate goal, isn't it?
It's kind of gone within 24, 48 hours anyway, unless it really like kind of flies, and it might last a week, but they're quickly gone. Uh,
Yeah.
and for me, it's just about being consistent, keep turning up, keep showing your face, keep telling people what it is that you do to hopefully gain some traction or some engagement, and then you just move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think you've said something really key there. It's consistency, isn't it? And that's the superpower in all of this is,
Mm.
whether it's social media or whether it's recruitment, whatever it is, that consistency, people talk about, I mean, there's podcasts, for instance, it's all about excellence, but consistency is quite a boring thing to talk about, but it's the superpower that is quite often overlooked.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people start things and, have great ideas and, put them into action, but to consistently do them when the novelty of that idea is worn off is where the success really happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. You perhaps call me Mr. Consistent in pretty much everything I do. I don't like change. I'm very process procedure. I have set ways of working, whether that be in recruitment or anything else.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
I'm very organised. I'm really selfish with my time in terms of making sure that I get the best out of every day. Um, and I have to be reminded every so often about the other things outside of business, i.e., holidays and doing all the nice bits, because I'm so motivated to be successful for my family and my kids, so that they've got opportunities and everything else. Um, that my wife is that good kind of yin to my yang, where it's that balance of not everything's about business and organisation and I suppose strategy there. It's about rest time and downtime.
Yeah.
We were talking off air, weren't we, about doing things with the family, going down to the coast, or whether it's going to watch people in concert and everything else.
Yeah.
But in terms of consistency and keep showing up, that is me. I think I've always been the same.
Which is probably in recruitment. I mean, there are a lot of recruitment consultants that are in it for make a quick buck, not in it for a long-term career, not in it to build those long-term relationships with their clients, over periods of years and, whole entire projects. And I think, like you say, that probably is what sets you apart at the beginning from, what is quite a saturated recruitment market in the UK, is that they probably hadn't experienced that level of consistency and that level of, delivery that you were giving them.
Well, I asked when I first started. I asked for feedback, and most clients and candidates would say things like, "They never got called on time. Nobody ever came back to me. We met them. We did a brief. Never got any CVs." It was all like the basic stuff. And even if you can't do things like deliver CVs, just tell them why you can't. Don't just disappear. And I think what I then have done, I've always recruited in the same market. So I've always done commercial construction. So the graduates based 18 years ago are now commercial directors and clients.
Oh, right. Okay.
The whole journey of people go through. And that's built a really solid base in terms of both candidates and clients. I know the good and the bad. I know who fits where and why. And I've basically and effectively tracked people's careers. That puts me in a really good place in terms of knowledge, experience, understanding my market. And I think in my experience, recruitment it's a very quick turnaround in terms of lifespan within recruitment anyway. I think the average life of a recruit is about 6 months. So if you're lasting past 6 months, you're doing better than most.
Yeah.
And then I think you can keep going and you can build those resilient relationships. Success comes with that.
100%.
Got to stick at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, how much of success is about what you do you think? And how much of it is about your mindset? Do you think much about, what you're thinking, or is it all about what you're doing?
It's both. I've trained myself over the years to change perhaps the language I use every day to be more upbeat, to carefully think about what I'm saying, because it has an impact, whether it's subconsciously the way that you hold yourself or the way that you're motivated for the day. It's simple things like when you say, "How are you doing?" You say, I would say, "I'm really good. I'm feeling positive," or "I'm energized." I used to say things like, "I'm not too bad." And it's just a real small marked difference. But if you build that up, so mindset's really important. And I like to think I've trained my brain to think more opportunity than hurdle. I think more solution than I think problem. And trying to get into that thought process effectively brings success anyway.
Yeah.
I've got very high levels of ambition and motivation. I'm up and out early. I'm definitely a morning person.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually. You're a morning person, because I've got a bit of a theory that recruitment consultants do tend to be morning people.
I think because construction tends to start 7, 7:30 anyway. I've just always been. I'm always up at 6 and out the door. I would much rather get things done. And my first thought process was, if I could get into the office an hour earlier than the competition and review the CVs and everything else, then by the time they're coming in to grab their coffee, I'm already done. And I've got the CVs out. I started in a time without really mobiles. We couldn't take laptops home. We were basically could only work in the office. So the only way to manage that was to get in earlier than everyone else and beat them to the...
Yeah, so that's quite funny because maybe I'm crazy, but my favourite time, when I was actually a billing consultant, my favourite time to work, and this is going to be probably the weirdest time you'll ever hear from anyone, is Sunday evening.
Yeah.
For about an hour, I would work Sunday evening because it would stop all of those sort of Sunday evening anxieties about getting to work on Monday, because I'd have my to-do list all done and everything. Also, I would do my whole week's quota of CV sends to clients. So they were on their desk for Monday morning. And the smug feeling I used to get on a Monday morning, knowing that all my competition were turning up, thinking they were getting the talent straight away because they were working at, 8 a.m. on a Monday, been and gone. Absolutely used to love it.
Sometimes, I don't know whether you've read a book called The Compound Effect, where they talk about the 1% incremental differences or changes that you can make. And when you sit there and you tweak certain things in what you do every day,
Mm-hmm.
Just a small step, that hour that you did each week,
Yeah.
is huge compared to what everyone else is doing. And I think people miss out on that because they don't necessarily self-assess, or they don't take a step back and just think, okay, what simple things could I do now? What's that 1% change I could do today
Mm-hmm.
that makes me more successful than either the next person or makes me more successful than I was yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's that smarter, not harder approach. Because if you've got your set process and you make every tiny cog of that, every tiny section of that, even less than 1% better, ultimately the whole process just becomes 20% better.
Yeah.
And then you start looking at your billings and you think, well, if I build 20% more, that then all of a sudden we're talking real figures, aren't we? Do you know?
Yeah, and if you look at each element of what you do, I say to consultants on the training program, if you're targeted to do 20 calls a day, 5 days a week, which is what my target was when I first started,
Mm.
if I did 21, I effectively do 2 extra weeks of sales calls every year.
Yeah.
And then when you work out how many sales calls you need to, I don't know, register your vacancies or spec in some candidates, and you start to find out that actually that one call a day means you place 4 or 5 more people, the difference is huge. And there's always a financial element to the bits that I kind of do. But when you start thinking things like that, and then you do 1% increases on, I don't know, fees or margins, or 1% in terms of I'm going to get one more CV out this week, and you do a little bit everywhere,
Yeah.
the results are phenomenal. And I think you can do that in all walks of life.
Yeah.
I've started on a 47-day detox today, by the way, in readiness
Okay.
for our holiday the end of July.
Oh
So
my goodness.
the challenge is there. I'm not having caffeine for the next 10 days, which is going to be horrendous.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, honestly, I can already feel the headache, and it's the first morning. But I think there's little bits. I kind of brought that in because it's not just about the work stuff. It's about health. It's about how you conduct yourself. It's all the elements in between. You get up
Yeah.
it's early and go and do a bit of meditation, or go for a run, or just do something that gets you towards a goal.
Yeah. Someone once said to me, go the extra mile, it's never crowded.
That's so true.
And I love it because you think those little things that don't make a difference. I don't know, I mean, I always relate everything back to sport and running. And I think, if I finish my run at 9.5 miles instead of 10 miles, it's not gonna be much difference once in a while. But if I always finish my run at 9.5 miles, or I'm the person that does 10.5 or 11, each time,
Yeah,
it all adds up, doesn't it?
yeah, I love that.
And if you're the person that does it and your competition are the people that don't, then that's your edge, and that's all you need sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how money driven, how financially driven are you right now? Is that, there's a a view of people who work in recruitment that we're all, financially driven and that's our be all and end all. But is that how you describe yourself?
Well, there's a big element of that. So I set myself on a 10-year plan when I was 35 to be
Hmm.
financially free in 10 years. So I'm 44 now. So I need to
Okay.
be financially free by February of next year.
Oh, clock
Um,
is ticking.
it is. And I put a post out on LinkedIn the other week, and I had a few messages saying, have you made it? Are you there? Are you going to hit your target? And at the moment, am I going to hit it? Potentially. Am I 9 years ahead of where I was when I was 35 and far more advanced than I ever could be if I hadn't put the plan in place? 100%.
Mm,
I would like to think that I've put things in place that ensure my kids will have opportunities and they'll be well looked after, and we will, in potential retirement and everything else, there's multiple streams of income, there's various
mm.
things in there that ensure we're in a good place. So yeah, financially driven is definitely there. I'd say I've had to learn to find that balance between ensuring I'm not spending every waking hour working and doing all the bits to ensure that's in place.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it is a big goal.
So, if you look back when you first started in recruitment, or maybe a few years into recruitment, would you say what motivates you now is different than what motivated you back then?
Yeah. So back when I first started, it was proving the doubters wrong. It
Yeah.
was it was becoming the quickest trainee to get promoted, quickest trainee to consultant, holding the monthly permanent billing records, holding that top biller status across.
It's more ego driven, isn't it?
It was more just to say you should have had faith in that I could have done what I said I was going to do. I used to drop emails back to the directors that said I'd never make it and just show them what I'd done or what I'd achieved. So the motivator at the start was actually just to prove to me and to everyone else that I could be a top level consultant. And actually, you don't need to be those big salesy, loud, shouty people. You could be the quiet, diligent ones that actually just deliver a good service and do well. So I would say that was my motivation. Things, my wife and I have been together, are we 23 years this year? Is that right? Something like that. A long time. We met as holiday reps years and years ago.
Oh.
When I first started in recruitment, we didn't have any children. Our boys are 11 and 6 now. So the motivations change. Obviously, when you've got dependents, there's a switch, isn't there, in the brain that you're responsible for something else now, and it's not just about going on nice holidays or having nice things. So things have certainly changed, and the motivations are perhaps in a different place.
Yeah, no, 100%. And recruitment's changed as well, hasn't it? I mean, in 20 years, it's unrecognisable now. You know, some of the processes we do now weren't available to us. The resources weren't available to us back then, and it's so different, isn't it? It's an entirely different job that you've had to evolve with.
Yeah, the ability to send out a message to thousands of people, whereas you used to have to do face-to-face meetings, really.
Yeah.
And now you can share a social media post and attract an audience. I think in some ways it's become far easier to be able to sell and deliver the messages that you want. In many ways, it's become perhaps a little bit trickier because it's a little bit murkier out there and there's perhaps a little bit more competition, faster ways of working.
Yeah.
But as I say, I'm still here, so still living the dream.
Living the dream. So you've described like a success story.
Yeah.
But there must have been times where you had huge setbacks. So what would you say has been one of your sort of biggest setbacks you've had?
I think the hardest time I had was I'd spent 2 and a bit years at Hayes. I was successful. I was kind of seen as the top billing perm consultant in the Midlands. I was doing really well. And I got headhunted to set up a new region for a company, open their Birmingham office. That was 2008, so it was a recession. Construction had basically just died. There was no perm recruitment. I was on a 6-month restrictive covenants, a new office, a new brand in a new region. And we were in an office where you could have probably seated about 30 people and there was 3 of us.
Oh, no.
Honestly, it was really, really difficult. The director left relatively quickly, so it left myself and the trades and labour consultant rattling around in this huge office. There were some really dark days. I didn't bill particularly well. The biggest sell at the time was that I could go in and effectively recruit my market across the whole of the UK, whereas at Hayes I had a really small portion of the West Midlands area. And my view was I could probably treble my billings, I could earn an absolute fortune, and it just wasn't the case. I was spread thinly, the service levels dropped. It was difficult to place anyway.
Oh, really?
And it was really tough. There were some dark days. There were some days where I thought there's got to be easier ways. There's got to be another way outside of here. And I ended up spending 11 years working with Fast Track. I opened a Manchester office 2015. I had 19 staff at its peak across the 2 offices, had a 7 million sales turnover.
Wow.
So on the back of what was really difficult, actually we forged some really strong relationships because it was about us all getting through the recession. It was about us all surviving and how are we going to do that? And actually it made for a better and healthier office. Because
and obviously the skills you would have learned in that, you would have drawn on for the rest of your career. I mean, it's a bit like, the recruitment consultants that battled through the pandemic and that weren't furloughed, the ones that had to keep working. okay, it was tough times, but there'll be a time when they'll hit another tough time and they'll draw on everything they've learned,
It's
which
a
I suppose
whole,
is probably similar for you.
yeah, it's a whole new level of resilience, isn't it? I mean, there's normal resilience on a day-to-day candidate hasn't turned up or your perm starter hasn't gone in, and you've
Mm.
got to kind of find that resolve. But trying to do it consistently where every business development calls a no, everybody's not looking. If anything, they're looking to let staff go, and you're sat there
Yeah,
going, "How am I ever going to make a placement?"
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
It's
a
tough.
whole new level, and I think it just, I don't know, it thickens the skin, doesn't it? Because you know if you're going to make a success that you've just got to battle on.
Yeah, but you've got to battle on. But I also think, I mean, if I think most recently to the pandemic, I was the only consultant at the business I was working at then. I'm not working there now, who wasn't furloughed,
Okay.
and the pressure I felt, to keep that business afloat
Yeah.
was like insane, like overwhelming some days. But sometimes there's the resilience where you keep doing what you're doing, but at some point I got to the point where I was like, I can't keep ringing the same people to talk about their recruitment plans when the whole country is being furloughed and we're in this crazy situation. So there's knowing when to keep knocking that door and doing the same thing, but there's knowing when to take a step back and go, there's probably there's I can think outside the box. I could still do what I do. I can still add value, but I can do it a bit different.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it taught me to be resilient, but it also taught me that you could just take a different path to the same solution. So instead of making those sales calls, I started releasing videos, and Boat Builder News was born, and that just made me realise that it's not always the path that you think you're going to take. And I think it taught me that. So that's quite an invaluable skill as well, I think, to learn from a tough time.
It's huge. And I think in times of adversity, you've got to spot the opportunities. I've got
Yeah,
the recruitment training program that was born out of COVID, where again, recruitment stopped. And
yeah,
I saw that probably 75% of the recruiters on my LinkedIn were on furlough.
yeah,
I cleared out my diary and said, book in for a 30-minute Zoom and we'll have a chat and see if I can add any value. I didn't expect anyone to book in, if I'm honest. If it was going to be ex-colleagues and friends booking in
yeah.
for banter and everything else. And it ended up being 62 recruiters on a global scale. I didn't know any of
Wow.
them, Monday to Friday. And what that taught me out of that was there was so few recruitment consultants with proper training or
Yeah,
thorough training. So I created the online training program. That's now, what is that, coming up to 2 years old. It's now working in partnership with the REC, who help promote and sell it. Um, and I think sometimes as individuals, we have to sit here and think, what can we do that adds value and how can we improve the lives of the people around us in whatever
yeah.
form? The opening the office in recession, it was about adding value. How can we tailor what we do and how we talk to people so it's not just a sell or a pitch? It's got
Yeah.
to be, how can we support you to get through this? What do you need us to do?
Well, that's the thing. You've got to give back to the industry that you're in, whatever industry that is, whether it's just as simple as saying social media.
Mhm.
You can't just take from the industry and expect it to keep giving. You've got to give back at some point. So I mean, like those Labour news videos, years I spent releasing those. I didn't get anything from them at the time. I mean, obviously now, but it was about how can I still add value in a time where I don't feel like I've got any value to add.
So true. So true. And I think I like to look at things as a journey. It's a whole process. It's not about a win today necessarily. It's about the fact that if you continue to keep giving and offering value and doing things that support others, over time things come back to you anyway.
Mm.
They just naturally do.
Yeah,
And I think everything that I've done, from the training to the free Facebook groups to writing the books to the social media posts, I do it all with honesty and integrity and with the aim to add value. And it's opened up opportunities that have scared me at the times, and I've kind of said yes and done them anyway. But if I hadn't have put that foot forward in the first place, I would probably be the one that sat here going, nothing ever happens to me. I never get any opportunities like that. Why does nobody ever ask me to do that?
Yeah.
And I just think you've just got to throw yourself into it at times to firstly put good stuff out, but actually to get good things back as well.
I completely agree. Like, I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. So, who's the biggest influence on you professionally at the moment?
Uh, I think it's such a big question, that is. And I tried to have a think before talking today, and it's all like the normal sorts of names. It's the likes of, like, I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett and all the kind of motivational people, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, Darren Hardy, all of those sorts of people. I think it's very much about surrounding yourself by really positive, outgoing, optimistic individuals. And I don't
Mm,
put it onto one particular person. Um, my key motivators are definitely my two boys, and
yeah.
I best say my wife as well. Certainly the boys, and I think they're an inspiration. Everything they do, they get to do things that hopefully the life we lead gives them, because it
Yeah.
can be full of opportunity. So I would say that's an inspiration. And watching them play their football and do their go karting and whatever else they do is fantastic.
Oh, awesome. So what's been the greatest piece of advice you've ever received?
Again, loads of advice over the years. The one that always sticks in my head, and I think being an ex-buyer as well, it's always stayed with me. I went to see an audience with Sir Doug Ellis
Okay.
before he passed away. Sir Doug Ellis, if people don't know, was the chairman of Aston Villa Football Club, and he was always renowned for watching and looking after the pennies. And he said, "An apple well bought is twice sold," and it stayed with me forever. And I think that the basic summary of that is just buy well and you'll make money. And I've done a bit of property investment and everything else over the years. And I just always focus on making sure the numbers are right at the start. And it's always stood me in good stead. It's good for the business here as well.
Yeah. That's a sound piece of advice. It's a piece of advice I've never heard before, but
I
I'll
love
probably give that some thought over the day, I reckon.
it. Is good. And I think if you start de-risking and managing the bit up front, generally the bit afterwards takes care of itself.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I'm definitely going to give some thought to that for sure. So, the one question we always ask everyone at the end of the show is, what one quote do you strive to live by? What motivates you every day?
I love my quotes. If
So
you
do
read
I.
Top Biller, there's a quote in every chapter. I love them. I think the one that I used to have in the frame years ago, this was probably when I started on my 10-year plan, was fortune favours the brave. It's a bit cliche and it's a bit kind of old school, but I like it just because everything I do is quite often outside of my character trait and it's
Yeah.
not comfortable. So I just think if I don't do this, I'm never going to get to where I want to get to. So just go with it, see how it goes, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love that because I suppose, it's the people that hesitate and then don't do it, aren't brave enough to do it.
But that was me.
I
I was always a bit of a perfectionist, and still am really. And I started going to a lot of seminars where they were saying if you're 75% happy with a post or something you're going to put out, just go with it because it will never be perfect.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think
it's accepting that, but then I suppose if you are somebody that's not brave enough to take that leap in whatever, I wonder if you're then the person that sits there and thinks, what if I'd done that? Do you know? And that there's probably no worse feeling than that, isn't it?
I don't want the what ifs. You
No.
don't want them. And actually, I mean, one of the big things for me is, and they do talk about it a lot, obviously failure can be good. And we talk, it's such a bad thing to happen. And actually, it's not. It's just it hasn't worked that time. And it's the ability to test and trial, get up and have another go. And so
Mm.
I'm writing my third book now. And I'm doing that on the basis that the first two have been received well. And I'm going to keep going until someone either tells me to shut up or where do you think you're going with this? Or I think it's just about the fact that you just, I don't know, just keep challenging yourself.
Yeah, I suppose it's back to that what you said earlier about it all being a journey, you know. So those failures are it's just another stepping stone in your journey, isn't it?
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. And you learn from it and you get up and fight another day.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation, Steve. You know, I've really, really enjoyed it and I've really appreciated everything that you said.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, then it would be awesome if you could leave a rating or a review. Don't forget to subscribe so you can listen to us again. See you soon.